Hello, I'm Graham and I hope everyone's having a great day. Welcome to this brand new tutorial series for the Panasonic Lumix DMC FZ1000. Now, I've had this camera for almost 3 years now, and it's a camera I really enjoy shooting with. Even though the Mark II will be out in the UK at the beginning of April 2019, which has some new feature sets that probably the Mark I should have had from day one, including the touchscreen and bigger, brighter EVF, plus extra functionality in the 4K video mode. The FZ1000, the original version, is still a fantastic camera to use. Having a 1-inch sensor with 20 megapixels gives you some great image quality, especially if you're going to be shooting in low light. Now, there are a couple of problems with this camera that I've probably outlined in other videos, but I'm not going to dwell on those. I'm just going to say it's a great camera, and if you've bought one, then hopefully this video tutorial series is going to help you get some great images from this camera. Now, today's video is all about shooting in the Intelligent Auto Plus mode. Some people refer to that as a point and shoot mode, but believe me, this camera has a lot of features under the hood that you can actually use to leverage some great pictures from it. So don't consider it as a point and shoot, consider it as a creative tool. It doesn't really matter how you're going to get the images from the camera, whether you're going to be using the Holy Grail to some people, which is the manual exposure mode, or you're using the point and shoot IA fully auto mode. You're still going to enjoy the types of images you're going to get from this camera, providing you understand some of the features that this camera has. So this video series is for ideally new users to the camera, to get you up to speed with the features and functions of the camera, what the buttons do, what the controls do, when you would use a certain control, why you would use it, and hopefully bring you through some of the photographic aspects of shooting with the Panasonic Lumix bridge camera range. Now, the fully auto mode, or IA Plus, is the default mode that the camera has when you take it out of the box, so Panasonic have chosen a good mode for you to begin with. Now, that IA Plus mode, or point and shoot mode, does have some hidden talents there that you can leverage from the camera. For example, you can actually shoot in the RAW mode. Now, RAW is the unprocessed data from the sensor stored as a file, and then you process it in an external editor, or you can actually process it within the camera itself. As it comes, the camera only gives you two profiles to play with in the IA mode. One is a color profile and the other is a black and white one. But there's no way to fine-tune those profiles to begin with. So if you do shoot RAW and process in camera, you can make new JPEGs from that RAW file in whatever photo style that you want to create. So more saturation, less sharpness, more sharpness, higher contrast, lower contrast. You can tweak the highlights and the shadows independently. There's a lot of control you can put on processing your images from within camera. But we're not going to talk about that today, but I am going to be shooting in the JPEG, which is a double bar fine JPEG mode, plus RAW, so I can use those RAW files in a later tutorial to show you what we can do with it. Now, also in the Intelligent Auto Plus mode, the camera gives you access to 3 extra controls. One is what's called exposure value compensation, which is really a brightness control. So if the camera metering circuit has got it wrong, for example, if you're shooting in snow, the camera would tend to underexpose everything because it's trying to drive that snow to a neutral 18% grey background, so it would underexpose the subject. So by using exposure compensation and dialing to the right to put positive exposure value compensation, you can correct for that. Similarly, if the camera is overexposing, you can turn the exposure value compensation to the left to darken down that image. Another control is the color tint control, and it's a way of modifying the white balance. So if you want a slightly warmer or a slightly colder picture, you can do that with the color tint control. And the third one, which is the most important one as far as I'm concerned if I'm shooting in this mode, is the option there to switch to a facility which allows me to select an aperture or shutter speed dependent on whether I'm shooting for depth of field or I want to arrest subject motion blur. So for example, if I'm shooting in a portrait and I want to get shallower depth of field, I can switch to that mode and select a wider aperture, say f2.8, and that gives me a shallower depth of field. If I was shooting sports or action, like this train coming along the train track, if I wanted to stop that motion, I need a faster shutter speed. So by going into this mode and then selecting a small aperture, which automatically gives me a faster shutter speed because of the way the exposure triangle works, I will get a faster shutter speed and arrest that subject motion. So all these things are available at your fingertips when you're shooting in that point and shoot mode. So you've got some great creativity in this camera to begin with. So what I want to do is set the camera up so I can film the back of the camera and show you some of the features and benefits using this mode, what you can see on the screen, what it's telling you, what you could expect when you're shooting certain scenes, and how to correct them if there's a problem. So let me set the camera up and let's start shooting. Well, I've got the camera set up now so we can actually film the back of the FZ1000. You can see at the moment I'm using what's called the programmed auto mode, but I'm going to switch to the intelligent auto mode by turning the top mode dial to the IA position so it aligns with the white index mark on the flash housing. So I do that, you'll see that we change from P to IA, and the camera will then show you the actual mode that it's actually selected. You can see that we've got a blue icon which then changes red, and we've got this symbol here which means we're in a landscape mode. So it's actually looked at the scene and determined that what we're shooting is a landscape. But you'll see this change to many different types, whether you're shooting for example a baby, or you're shooting food, or you're shooting a portrait, then this icon will change as you change the scene type. Other things you'll notice here on the screen is the fact that we've got no exposure value compensation, and that's the one that I use mostly when I'm shooting in the fully auto mode. Along the top of the screen you can see we've got here, we're in a standard profile, flash is disabled, we've got a video record setting here of MP4 Full HD. The aspect ratio that I'm shooting in at the moment, which is 16:9, and it's the large format, so that's the highest resolution that the camera will give me. That times out after that 2 minutes, so we re-enable it. And now you can see I'm shooting in RAW plus JPEG, and that's the option that I'd like you to use so you can actually process these images later on. The camera is set up for AFS, so that's autofocus single. It's in face detect mode, and the battery indicator is showing we've got 2/3 full. On the right hand side here we've got the image count, and that shows me the number of images that are left on the card, or if you were shooting video it would give you the time remaining on the card. And here it says intelligent ISO, so the camera is controlling the ISO, that's the sensitivity to light. Now if I take a picture, press the shutter button halfway down, you can see some rectangles appear on the screen, and those are the areas that the camera considers to be in focus. So sometimes when you're taking a picture it might not select the correct area, and I'm going to show you some dodges to make it select the correct area later in this video. So at the moment the important thing to look at is the combination of the aperture and shutter speed, and you can see those on the bottom left hand side. So the camera is set up for an aperture of f2.8, so that's the widest aperture the camera has at this particular focal length, and the shutter speed is 1/500th of a second. If I wanted to know what the actual ISO would be for this particular scene, then I'd have to take the photograph. It doesn't actually show you on screen, but if I take that picture, you can see it's showing me that we're using ISO 125. So the camera's made a good choice. It's gone for a low aperture to give me maximum light into the camera, a fast shutter speed, and a very low ISO to get rid of any image noise. So intelligently the camera's working fine. Now you can change the way that this display is brought to you by pressing the display button. So you can cycle through the options, so you can have it with minimalistic information for shooting, so aperture and shutter speed. You can have the full information which shows you everything that you've got set up. So we've got the RAW plus fine JPEG, we've got 16:9 large format, an aperture of f2.8, battery indicator, the automatic white balance is set, intelligent contrast, and all the other features that are being used by the camera in that mode. So if you want to drill down to get more data, this is a screen to see at the moment. So back to the original shooting screen, which is the one with all that information. You can see we've got enough information for us to take that photograph. Now remember I said we can actually change exposure value compensation, so we can actually change the way the camera is responding. So if I felt this scene was a little bit dark, I can change the exposure value compensation by pressing the top control dial. So if I push this inwards, you'll notice that we've now got control of that control because it changes into this yellow colour. If I move the control to the right, I'm adding exposure value compensation. So you can see the scale is moving to the right, the scene is getting brighter, and you can see on the exposure meter scale how it's been achieved. So it's keeping the aperture the same, but it's changing the shutter speed. If I felt the scene was too bright, then I can change the control over to the left hand side, and you can see that it's darkening the image down. So that is exposure value compensation. So that is the image without exposure value compensation, and that is the image with -1 EV. When you're in the middle position, that is where the meter says that's the correct exposure. But as I said before, sometimes the meter can get fooled in some scene types. While that's enabled, so it's yellow, if you press it one more time, it changes to the aperture and shutter speed combination. Now it means you can change the aperture. So if I move the control to the right, you'll notice I'm going to a smaller aperture of f8, which is the smallest aperture the camera supports, and that gives me the greatest depth of field. Move it to the right and it will go to the minimum aperture. Now that minimum aperture will change dependent on the zoom length or the focal length of the lens. So if I was to just come out of that screen and I zoom all the way to 400 millimeters, and then I go back into control, you can see that my minimum aperture now is f4. So that's the limitation with this camera. It's not a constant aperture lens like the FZ300 or 330. We do lose one stop of light from the f2.8 to f4 at the longest focal length. So bear that in mind if you're taking telephoto pictures in low light. You are losing that extra stop of light, which is important. And the other one I mentioned was the color tint control. So here, by pressing the white balance and moving that to the right, you can see that I've got a scale which goes between amber and cyan. So it's changing it from a warmer scene to a colder scene. So now I can actually use the back navigation button. I can move it all the way over to the left hand side and make the scene warmer. We'll take that picture. Or I could move it all the way over to the right hand side, take that picture, and you can see it's a much colder. So you can actually change the way that this white balance control is working. Bring it back to the center point, which is a neutral component. Now we talked about setting up the camera. It's in the Intelligent Auto Plus mode. You can see that indicated on the screen here. So if you just use your left hand cursor key, it brings you over to the tabs over on the left hand side, and it can come down, and these are the settings you can apply for Intelligent Auto Plus. So we've got the photo styles, but as I said before, we've only got a choice between standard, which is color, and monochrome, which is black and white, but you can't change these individual parameters, as I said before. The aspect ratio is how you would capture the image, so you've got the choice between 4:3, 3:2, 16:9, or a square aspect. Now if you're shooting pictures that you want to include in HVT video, then you use this 16:9 aspect ratio, and the 4:3 and 3:2 are photographic print sizes, so you choose one of these dependent on how big you want your images. So a 6:4 would actually fit onto a 3:2 format. So in my guide I've shown you how to select the right aspect ratio for a different print size. So I'm shooting 16:9 because I want to include these in my video for you. Go back. The picture size is how many pixels you're going to resolve in your image. So at the moment I'm using the highest resolution, and that's the one I'd expect you to use as well. So in this format, large format, the actual pixel size is 17 megapixel, and that's made up from 5472 by 3080 pixels. Go down to the 8 megapixel, so we're using the same sensor, but we're actually down resolving it a little bit to give you a more compressed picture. And again down to 1920 by 1080 would be for your standard HD picture, not 4K. So that would be the 4K setting, and that would be your full resolution. Quality is the quality of the image captured by the camera, and you can see here I've got RAW and the fine JPEG. So if I select that, you've got fine JPEG, which is the one I'd recommend if you're only shooting in JPEG. A more compressed file for the next JPEG option. RAW plus fine JPEG, RAW plus more compressed JPEG, or RAW on its own. But if you're shooting in the Intelligent Auto Plus mode, shooting in RAW only gives you the advantage you can change exposure compensation. It doesn't give you the other benefits of the JPEG processing that the camera's using in Intelligent Auto Plus. So I would suggest you go for RAW plus JPEG. AFS and AFS is the way that the camera will capture the image. So one is autofocus single and the other is autofocus flexible. Autofocus flexible means that the camera will change the focus point even if your subject moves forward or backwards. The burst rate is the rate at which the camera will capture a series of images, and you can choose between high, medium and low, and we'll come back to burst mode shooting when we talk about these semi-automatic modes. Auto bracket allows you to take pictures and the camera will make an over, normal and underexposure picture if you're not quite certain of the exposure. The self-timer mode you can change between 10 seconds or 2 seconds, and it's ideal if you're using this on a tripod so you don't get any vibration from when you're pressing the shutter button. So normally I would leave that on 2 seconds if I'm shooting outside on a tripod. Time-lapse animation we'll cover in a later video, and now the shutter type, we can change this between a mechanical shutter and an electronic shutter, or we can have the camera decide on leaving it in auto. Default is in M shutter. It means that you can actually use this with flash. If you're in the E shutter mode, you'll find that your flash is disabled and you wonder why, but if you leave it in manual shutter, it means that if you're using automatic flash, the flash can actually fire if it's needed to. Now we'll go through some other settings on the other tabs when we're shooting video and when we're looking at some of the finer features, but for the moment, so this video is not going to get overly long, we're going to keep it to just the record setup screen for the images. So the four-way navigation dial allows us to change our white balance in the color tint mode. It allows us to change the focus area. So if we're having trouble trying to select the focus point, we can actually change the focus area. Unfortunately, we can't change the size of that target as we can in other modes, but it does allow you to define where you want the camera to set focus if you're having trouble getting the camera to recognize the principal point of focus in your image. So you can see now the camera has selected that tree where I've set the focus point. So again, you can use that to make the camera select the focus point that you want rather than where it wants. Well, that's it for this short video. I hope you found that useful. If you are a new viewer to the channel, please do click the subscribe button at the end of the video, click the bell notification icon, and then you'll be notified when I upload the next videos in this series. Also, please check out my photographic blog, and I'm going to put links to those in this video description below. There you'll find lots more information on Panasonic Lumix bridge cameras, Micro Four Thirds systems, and on the Canon EOS M50. Also on the homepage of that blog is the application to join my 3 weekly newsletter. Now that newsletter now is a technical publication in its own right, and it goes out to just over 2,700 people now over 3 weeks. So if you want to join that group, just fill in the subscription form and that gives me the authority to email you that newsletter. So that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget, if you are a new user of the camera and struggling, there's my new user guide that's available on Amazon now, or if you want the PDF copy, have a look at my book page on the photographic blog where you can purchase the PDF copy and follow along the series as we go. So until the next video, thanks very much for watching, please do take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.